Morning.
Morning.
I don't know about you, but it's beginning to look a lot like Hanukkah, and I wanted to start a sort of a 2 week look at Hanukkah this week or week prior, and then next week it will actually be our class on the first day of Hanukkah. So, we'll be able to celebrate the holiday together. So I wanted to look at a historical question, which is, I'm going to sort of pose the question, and then we're going to answer it over the next sort of hour or so that we have together. So I think most of us are fairly and probably very familiar with the story of Hanukkah, the historical part of Hanukkah. So the question is, not the question of what the miracle is, but the question is that we're going to look at today is, what did the Maccabees light when they rededicated the temple, when they pushed back and turned away their oppressors, the Syrian Greeks, and they won back Jewish religious freedom in Israel, in the story of Hanukkah that we are going to be celebrating from a little more than 2,000 years ago. So what do they light? Do we know? If you give me the answer, then we don't have to study together for the next hour. What did they actually light?
I'm thinking of the candelabra or whatever it was that Aaron was supposed to light every morning.
Right. So we read in the Torah, right? First described in the Torah in the book of Exodus, in the listing of all the furnishings of the Mishkan, of the tabernacle, that there is a menorah. There is a golden candelabrum that is constructed by Aaron. And what do we know about the candelabrum, if you remember?
But it was made out of gold, and
Yeah,
it had to have been
piece
big
of
enough.
solid gold.
What?
Like one piece of solid gold, some huge
Right.
piece of gold. Yeah.
What I was
Okay.
going to say,
And
it had to be large enough that the verb, at least in the English translation, is he had to mount it, which means it had to be
very
big
tall.
enough to climb up.
Right, a huge candelabrum. And how many branches was the candelabrum?
Was I just going to say 7 branches?
7-branch candelabrum, right? This huge thing of gold. If you remember, that actually describes that the base that was lit from it was an oil menorah or oil candelabra. They didn't do candles. If they were like flower petals, if you remember, that's how the Torah describes them.
So my question is, did he light it on Shabbos? Just like, I mean, I know we did the sacrifices on Shabbos, so we also light the menorah. Sorry, not the menorah.
The
menorah on Shabbos. I keep getting confused between menorah and Hanukkah and candelabra.
Yeah, they're all the same. Right.
No,
what does the word menorah mean?
Hanukkah is 8 branches.
What does the word menorah mean? Translate.
I can't. The English word is menorah.
Yeah, menorah is candelabrum, which means anything that we light that has candles or lights or something, any type of candlestick. A Chanukiah is a specific kind. So menorah is a broad category. Theoretically, could say like the Shabbos candles that we light is a menorah. It's a general category, right? The Chanukiah is a specific type of menorah, candelabrum that's lit for Hanukkah that has a specific either 8 or 8 plus a shamash. Okay, so Ron is saying, and you're going to tell me, the good news is, Ron, that I don't think, at least the class, we're going to try to prove that you're not correct, right? Ron is saying that when the Maccabees rededicated the temple and fought back the Greeks, that they lit the original menorah, the 7-branch menorah, that Aaron, the high priest, and
the obvious other choice is the Ner Tamid, but I don't think it was in existence yet.
No, the the thing that we're talking, the biblical, the tabernacle, the Mishkan's light, that 7-branch menorah was the Ner Tamid. They were synonymous. Yeah. Our Ner Tamid became the
not
same.
exactly, because that was relit every day, and the Ner Tamid goes 24/7.
Now it does, but there's not a law.
And it's not a menorah made up of a lot of branches. So it's not.
No, but it could be.
It either evolved or devolved, but I don't know when.
Yeah, after the menorah didn't exist, the rabbis repurposed, reimagined, recast the menorah that was lit daily by the high priest as the Ner Tamid that burns in every synagogue 24 hours. It's the same thing. Okay, any other guesses before we'll look at some historical texts? No? Well, if I told you it wasn't what Ron said, then we got to figure it out.
I do have another guess, but how about the fire on the altar?
The fire on the altar. Yeah. Yeah, that's different.
But that wasn't oil, though.
No. Yeah, I don't know what it was. It was divine. Yeah, I don't know what it was. A little charcoal and a little kerosene. I don't know.
Well, if they weren't doing it in the middle of the desert where there weren't any trees, I would say it was tree branches.
Kindling. Yeah, I'm sure it was tree. I'm sure it was tree branches. Okay, but let's actually go and read some historical and what the rabbi said in the Talmud thousands of years ago as to what actually, what the Maccabees lit. And then we'll talk about how that sort of processed into what we like today. Okay, sound like a deal? Okay, so we're going to begin by studying from the historical book, which is called the Book of Maccabees. Anyone know where you would find the Book of Maccabees?
In the Christian Bible.
In the Christian Bible, yes. Yes. Is it a Christian work?
Maccabees 1 and 2 is questionable. 3 and 4 is, I think.
So these are historical books written by the Jews around the time of Hanukkah, when Hanukkah actually happened. It's a historical book, probably originally written in Greek, translated into Hebrew, and now, for us, translated into English. But they were part of the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible. So they were considered almost biblical by Jews. Historical, it didn't make it into the cut of the Bible for 2 reasons. Reason number 1 was the Bible was finished by the time the Hebrew Bible had concluded. By the time of Hanukkah, the Bible was canonized, codified, and finished. Hanukkah happens later in Jewish history, but it's a historical book that is considered almost close to biblical, but not. I will read to you, according to the HarperCollins Study Bible, which is not Jewish. The text of 1 Maccabees is in Greek and is part of the Septuagint. It is generally assumed that the work was originally composed in Hebrew and translated into a biblical Greek. In its style and language, it is similar to the Greek versions of the biblical Jewish Hebrew biblical books, 1st and 2nd Samuel and 1st and 2nd Kings. So this is some historical book written by the Jews that has some that we consider actually has validity, and it's old, it's ancient, it's from the time of the Maccabees themselves. So I want to actually read what it says there happened. We're going to look at a couple of versions. It is in that source sheet, the source that we oftentimes use, Sefaria, the online source, but we're going to go to a different version from a book on Hanukkah. If you can see my thing, one of my favorite books, it's called A Different Light, the Hanukkah Book of Celebration by Noam Sion and Barbara Spector. So we're going to go to that version. Sherry, you want to be my reader?
Sure.
You know, I get one of these days I'm going to have to start paying you for this. Okay.
I'm always happy to read. If anybody else volunteers, that's fine with me too.
You do it so well, though. You do it so well. Okay. So we're going to skip over the part where Antiochus sort of takes power. So now we're going to read about sort of what happens. Okay. If you can see, there emerged. Do you want me to make it bigger?
Bigger would be good.
Bigger would be good. Okay. How about that?
That's good. There emerged a wicked offspring from the dynasty of Seleucus named Antiochus Epiphanes. In 169 BCE, the wicked Antiochus Epiphanes entered Jerusalem with a large force. In his arrogance, he went into the sanctuary and took the gold altar and the menorah for the light. He also discovered and plundered the hidden treasuries of silver and gold. Then he massacred many people. There was great mourning everywhere throughout Israel. Rulers and elders groaned, girls and young men fainted away, and the beauty of the women faded. Every bridegroom began to lament, and the bride in the bridal chamber grieved.
Okay, so this is the prelude to Antiochus taking power. He's now the Greek leader in the Middle East. By the way, before this, the Greek dynasty, the Greek Empire, was actually friendly with Israel and the Jewish people. They sort of conquered everywhere else but Israel. They sort of avoided it, and they sort of had an understanding and a peace agreement. But then a new leader came up in the empire, Antiochus, who we hear is wicked, right? And he attacks Jerusalem. And when he comes and attacks Jerusalem with his army, what does he do?
He steals the menorah.
He steals the menorah. Yeah. And this is like a paraphrasing. If we actually look in the text, let me see if I have it up here? Let me just find the Maccabees. Shoot, hold on. I'll pull it right up in a second. Like the English. Of course, now I can't find the English version. All right, trust me, it's there. I'll find it later for us. Okay, let me go back to where we were. So basically, what does Antiochus do with the menorah that Ron told us about? The biblical menorah that was crafted by our ancestors during the time when they wandered the desert for 40 years, and they lit the 7-branch menorah every day. What happened to it? It was stolen, captured, stolen, and taken away. By the way, seems historically that this is the disappearance, and it never returned. It never returned. So, Ron, the short answer to the question is, it never came back. So we don't know what happened. So we'll just read a little bit later about what other things that Antiochus did, if you want to read later.
Later, the king wrote to his whole kingdom that they should all become one people.
And
everyone should give up his ordinances. Anyone who did not obey the command of the king would die. The king appointed inspectors over all the people, and he ordered the towns of Judah every one of them to offer pagan sacrifices. Many of the people who were ready to forsake the Torah joined with them, and they did evil in the land and forced Israel, loyal Jews, to hide in every refuge they could find. Please go on.
Sure.
Not long after, the king sent an old Athenian to force the Jews to forsake the laws of their ancestors and to cease governing their lives according to the laws of God. He forced them to pollute the temple in Jerusalem and dedicate it to the Olympian Zeus, god of the heavens. This most grievously intensified the evil, for the Greeks filled the temple with riotous revelry, amusing themselves with prostitutes and lying with women within the sacred precincts. Jews could not keep Shabbat or celebrate the festivals of their ancestors or admit that they were Jews in any way at all. On the celebration of the king's birthday, they were forced to taste the sacrifices, and when the festival of Dionysus was celebrated, the Jews were compelled to wear wreaths of ivy and march in procession in his honor. On the 15th day of Kislev, Antiochus erected a dreadful desecration, which probably refers to an idol of Zeus, upon the temple's altar, and in the surrounding towns of Judah, they built pagan altars. At the doors of their houses and in the squares, they burned incense, and wherever they found scrolls of the Torah, they tore them up and burned them. If anyone was found who possessed a book of the covenant or respected the Torah, the king's decree condemned him or her to death.
Keep going.
Yeah, let me scroll up a little bit.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. On the 25th day of the month, they offered a pagan sacrifice upon the altar.
Okay. So now if we want to sort of just back up for a second, what were the Jews supposed to do or not do? Good old Antiochus.
Yeah, they weren't allowed to practice their Judaism.
Right, they weren't allowed to practice Judaism. Torah scrolls were burnt. Right, they couldn't keep Shabbat. They couldn't admit that they were Jews in any way. Right, and what did Antiochus do to the temple? The Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. He dedicated to the Olympian god Zeus. He polluted it. And on the 25th of Kislev, what did they do? They offered a pagan sacrifice upon the altar. Usually we understand this, that they sacrificed a pig on the altar, right? The most sort of non-Jewish thing, non-kosher thing that could be offered, non-kosher animal, on the 25th of Kislev, which happens to be Hanukkah, right? So we'll see, like, it's exactly 3 years later, historically. I'm not sure if that's historically accurate or not, but exactly 3 years later is when the story ends, when the Maccabees rededicate they clean the sacrifice, the sanctuary, and they rededicate the sanctuary exactly 3 years later. So, when we talk about, like, why did they light the Chanukiah? Why did they use the oil that only had one day when they didn't have enough? We don't really talk about it, but again, perhaps, I'm not sure if it's historically accurate, but perhaps specifically lighting it on that day there was a historical significance, right? This was the same day that the temple was sort of, dishonored to its highest level, right? So something about rededicating it specifically on the anniversary of the dishonor is really important, right? So, like, we never really talk about that. We talk about they had faith, they had courage, they had hope, God would take care of them, just not to delay, right? If there's an opportunity, we should grab that opportunity to do a mitzvah. There's all sort of different reasons we often say, but we don't really necessarily talk about the fact that, this was a day that they wanted to sort of restart history and have a positive thing happen on a really bad day. Also,
isn't it true that the whole oil incident in the 8 days doesn't that not show up in the Talmud for like another 400 or 500 years?
Correct. Yeah, that's another conversation just to do the, oh, good morning. Hi. We've grown. I haven't seen you guys. Yeah.
Picking the date makes sense, but the rest of it is midrash.
Yeah, well, so what we're gonna do, and those who came in late, the question is, what did the Maccabees actually light when they rededicated the temple on Hanukkah and conquered and pushed away the Greek oppressors? So what we're finding is, historically, it doesn't seem clear that they relit the famous menorah, the same from biblical times, from ancient times, that was lit for about more than 1,000 years, that same menorah, because our story begins in the historical work, the book of Maccabees, that the holy menorah that was lit every single morning by the high priest was actually stolen, plundered, and removed from Israel by Antiochus and the Greeks at the beginning of the story. So the question is, when the Maccabees came in, the menorah actually wasn't there. So what did they light? So yeah, Ron, you're right. Just to very quickly say, if you don't know, right, the story of one single cruse of oil, of consecrated oil remaining and lighting it, again, if we're looking historically in Jewish text, it doesn't appear until late, several hundred years after after Hanukkah actually happened, do we have the first telling of this version of the miracle of oil lasting. Everyone agrees that the Maccabees rededicated the temple and they lit something, because even as you said, with the Ner Tamid that we have today in our sanctuaries, right? That's how we honor God. We show God's presence, right? And that we always light something to show God is with us. So the Maccabees did light something. The only question is, what didn't they light? And then there's this whole question of, did this miraculous oil lasting, how historically accurate is it? We're not going to, that's for another class. Maybe we'll do that next week. Yeah. Okay. So just to show you one last thing, which is this book actually lists out sort of like all the prohibitions that Antiochus sort of laid up on the Jews. And Shara, if you want to just read them through, and I'll pull it up. For those that didn't come on, we're doing some, here we go. It's this list of the decrees of Antiochus, if you can see it on the right.
No Jewish sacrifices may be offered in the temple of God. Instead, mandatory sacrifices of pigs and impure animals were dedicated to Zeus on the temple's altar. Pagan temples were to be built throughout Judea. No circumcisions were allowed on pain of death to child, parent, and male. The Torah was to be forgotten and its legal system replaced with Greek law. Shabbat and holidays were to be desecrated. The celebration of the emperor's birthday was enforced, including the eating of sacrifices made in his honor. Participation in Dionysian processions crowned with ivy wreaths was required. It was prohibited to identify oneself as a Jew, including perhaps the prohibition of the use of Jewish names.
That's, yeah, you don't need to know. They have a thing they write later. By the way, since we're Cleveland and our sister city in Israel is Beit Sha'an, I don't know if you know, there's a lot of Dionysus archaeological findings that they found in Beit Sha'an. Another sort of interesting connection, if you've ever seen what archaeologists have unearthed there. Okay, so I'm going to ask you the question now, right? The question is, if they didn't light the menorah, what did they light? If it was important it was an essential part of the running of the day-to-day operations of the holiest space for the Jewish people, the temple, to have something lit to symbolize God's light is in our world, in our presence, and God is sort of shining on us, right? What did they light?
if the light itself was the important thing, does it matter what the oil was in when it was lit?
Do we say it matters? Do we say that a menorah has to look a certain way, be a certain way,
Yeah.
a number of things lit? Oh,
Is it way lit?
there actually are law, halacha. There is specific requirements of what a menorah is supposed to look like. How many things, different heights, different sizes, when it's lit. So there are some laws around it. Other thoughts?
I don't have a thought on that, but I do have a question. When did Hillel and Shammai have the argument about which way to light the menorah? From right to left and left to right.
They lived about 200 years after Hanukkah happened.
So they were already
about 300 years before the oil story perhaps appeared.
So they were already talking about how to light the menorah, but nothing about the oil.
Correct. Well, I mean, it was using oil, right? And again, those who don't know,
I mean, nothing about the cruise of oil that only lasted a day.
Correct.
Should only have lasted. I mean, it's long before that, but yet they already knew about which order. They were already discussing which order to light it.
Yes.
So there had to be some kind of a substitute menorah of some kind, or they wouldn't have been discussing it.
All right, you might be onto something. Other thoughts? And Ron, thanks for giving me the English. I'm fine. I'm scrolling to find the exact spot. Yeah. Any other thoughts? I'm finding the exact spot to. All right, Sherry, you want to read next? Sure. Okay, now we're actually going to read. Let me find you. Now we're going to actually read from the book of Maccabees about what happened when we're sort of jumping in history. And this is now when they actually defeated the Greeks, pushed the Greeks out, and they came upon the sanctuary. Okay?
Upon this, all the host assembled themselves together and went up into Mount Zion. When they saw the sanctuary desolate and the altar profaned and the gates burned up and shrubs growing in the courts as in a forest or in one of the mountains, yea, and the priest's chambers pulled down, they rent their clothes and made great lamentation and cast ashes upon their heads and fell down flat to the ground upon their faces and blew an alarm with the trumpets and cried toward heaven. Then Judas appointed certain men to fight against those that were in the fortress until he had cleansed the sanctuary. So he chose priests of blameless conversation, such as had pleasure in the law, who cleansed the sanctuary and bare out the defiled stones into an unclean place. And when as they consulted what to do with the altar of burnt offerings, which was profaned, they thought it best to pull it down, lest it should be a reproach to them because the heathen had defiled it, wherefore they pulled it down and laid up the stones in the mountain of the temple in a convenient place until there should come a prophet to shew what should be done with them. Then they took whole stones according to the law and built a new altar according to the former, and made up the sanctuary and the things that were within the temple and held the courts. They made also new holy vessels, and into the temple they brought the candlestick and the altar of burnt offerings and of incense and the table. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlestick they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now, on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month Kaslu.
Kislev.
Oh, Kislev, all right.
It's a bad translation. In the Hebrew, it says
Yeah.
Kislev. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I could read the Hebrew much better. In the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they made. Look at what time and what day the heathen had profaned it, even in that it was dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. When all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, who had given them good success.
Okay, so what do they light?
There was some kind of candelabra there.
Okay, does everyone agree with that?
Well, it said something about candlesticks.
Yeah,
So-
they brought a candlestick.
But they were new candlesticks.
Yeah, so it sounds like they made new vessels. And it sounds like they made new vessels that weren't there before.
Where did they get all that gold to do that? Because it says they made it according to the specifications.
Yeah, and actually, if you remember when Sherry read the original, and I don't know if it was in the paraphrase version that we saw, Antiochus didn't just steal the menorah. He actually went into the treasury room and stole all the gold that was kept in the Beit HaMikdash in the temple and removed it all. Let's just read, Sherry. I'm going to put you to work one more time. Let's read the paraphrase version. That's a little bit better English, so that we make sure we understand. Sorry. The first Hanukkah. Here we go. Judah and his brothers.
Judah and his brothers said, "Now that our enemies are crushed, let us go up to purify the sanctuary and rededicate it." So the whole army gathered together, and they went up to Mount Zion. They found the sanctuary desolated, the altar polluted, the doors burned up, and weeds growing in the courts as they do in a forest or on some mountain.
Isn't that like really sad? That's
Yeah.
how the Holy Temple was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Judah's men tore their clothes as a sign of mourning, covered themselves with ashes, sang songs of lament, and fell on their faces on the ground. They sounded the shofar and cried out to heaven.
By the way, it's a different version, right? This says it sounded the shofar. In the version that we read, it said they sounded trumpets.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, go ahead.
Then Judah appointed priests that were without blemish and adherents of the law, and they purified the sanctuary.
Wait, by the way, just you see, this is that image of the biblical, really tall, one piece of gold that was formed and beaten, beautiful menorah.
Since you made a point of trumpet versus shofar, what did the Hebrews say?
Again, that's a question whether we don't have the original Hebrew. We have the Septuagint version, which then somebody later, more recently translated into Hebrew. There it said trumpet, but we only have the Greek version. So I didn't look at the actual Greek version to see what it says. The Hebrew version that we just looked at said trumpet. So I actually might trust Noam Sion, who's an excellent scholar, better from this book. Yeah. Okay, Judah's men.
Judah's men made a new menorah. And
Made a new menorah? Go ahead. Okay, keep going.
Then they arose early on the 25th day of the 9th month, that is the month of Kislev, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar which they had made. At the very time and on the very day the Greeks had polluted the temple 3 years earlier, it was rededicated with songs and harps, lutes, and cymbals. All the people fell on their faces and blessed heaven, which had prospered them. They celebrated the rededication of the altar for 8 days.
Right now they're going to get into, was this just delayed Sukkot? And actually in the book of Maccabees, it said that Judah takes up a lulav and he doesn't, that's perhaps 8 days because they didn't get to celebrate Sukkot when they were doing guerrilla war and all these things. But okay, they made a new menorah. By the way, if we look at, I'm going to stop the share to now go to the Hebrew from the other version for us Hebrew readers. I didn't show you there, but it said when we talked about the vessels, if you're a Hebrew reader, can you see this word that I'm pointing at? Vayichadshu. What's chadash mean?
New.
New. Vayichadshu at kol, kalei hakodesh. Right? They made new every single vessel, holy vessel that is used in the sanctuary. So it sounds like, what did the Maccabees do? What did they do?
And a refurbishing.
Yeah, they built a new menorah. So, right, Ron asked, where did they get all the gold? Where did they get all the gold? So guess what? Here we go. We're going to look at a source. Can you see my screen? Yes? Oh, no, I
No.
pushed the wrong button. Sorry, hold on, you'll get there. Here we go. It's not letting me do it. Here we go. Okay. All right, so Rabbah Sarah Hurwitz has a source she called Seeking Resilience, which in the Talmud, in the Masechet, the book called Avodah Zarah, there it talks about the menorah that was lit by the Maccabees. And it says, it sort of alludes to it, and then it goes, but originally it was made of wood. It was made of wood, and it was covered with iron and tin originally. Much more affordable than gold, right? And then the Gemara, the Talmud says this. Later, when they, the Jewish people, grew richer and could afford a menorah of higher quality material, they fashioned it with silver. They kept layering upon it. They used the same one, but they coated it with silver. And when they grew even richer, they covered it with gold. So actually, over time, the menorah that the Maccabees used, that the Maccabees crafted, became the menorah, and it sort of evolved. It was originally wood, then it was covered with a cheap material that they were able, a cheap metal they were able to have, iron, strong material, iron, then tin, which looked prettier, then silver, which looked more honorific, and finally gold. And if you've seen, I'm going to show you again the screen share. Oh, I pushed the wrong button. Should know already how to do screen share. It's been long enough. Hello. Show all windows. Have you seen the picture of the menorah from the Arch of Titus? Does anyone know that? I'll show you in a minute. I'll show you right now. Menorah, Arch of Titus. Right, this is the menorah that the when the Romans destroyed the temple. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Whoa, I did not mean to zoom. Okay. This menorah, does it look different than, I feel like I'm at the eye doctor. Does it look different than this menorah? Look different or the same?
Similar.
Similar, look at the base.
Mhm. Yeah, different.
Right, this is very fancy, artistic, this like three-legged thing. right? These beaten things that look like flower petals and pomegranates, right? That's not this, correct?
Mhm.
Right? This is this wide, sturdy base that has actually different images on it, right? And no flower petals, correct? So does this perhaps give us another historical proof that there was a second menorah that was different, that was lit? Am I selling you on it yet?
Well, it's obviously somebody's conception of what a second menorah would look like.
The
Yeah.
the one on the arch was supposed to be the original one, right?
The one on the Arch of Titus
My question is, did they
the
take
one on the Arch
did
of
they take
Titus is the one that the Romans took when they
I know, but
destroyed the second
I'm
temple.
wondering if they took
By the way, that was 200 years after Hanukkah. So it was whatever menorah they were using from Hanukkah forward. The original Hanukkah. Yeah.
I'm going back to the arch one. That one supposedly was the one that they took from the temple.
Yeah, I'm saying, but I mean the one
that does not. But that what I saw there in that picture was not the description from the Torah.
exactly right. So that's what I'm saying is
So what
the
were there two of
Maccabees.
them so my question is, were there two of them in the first place and they hid the original one?
No, I mean, at least historically, right? The Greeks stole the original one. Never came back. We don't know where it is. The Romans stole the second one that the Maccabees made, which was different. They had to work quickly. Like they had to build something fast with the materials that they had after a war effort, right? And they didn't have all those materials, nor did they have the time to cast this beautiful golden, 12-foot or however tall the menorah is. And this is what they built. Now I'm going to give you, before we finish up, there's a third possibility. You
Rabbi, I have a
ready?
question when you're
Yeah.
ready.
All right,
Question about the multi-layered new version of the menorah. Whatever became of that? The second one.
Well, we just said the Romans stole it. When the Romans destroyed the second temple, this is what we looked at. This picture is across the street from the Colosseum in Rome. This is from the arch that celebrates the conquest of Israel and Jerusalem by the Romans in 70-72. And this is this is what the menorah looked like. They plundered it and brought it to Rome, and we don't know where it is anymore. It never appeared again.
Wow.
So, I mean, one would think this was actually this relief. It's a frieze, and I've been there. It's really powerful to stand there. Number one, powerful as a Jew to stand at a relief, something that happened to us 2,000 years ago, and we're still there. And we're still thriving, thank God. Not just surviving, but resilient. Right? But this is probably historically accurate. Like, why would the Romans design it this way if they saw it, right? Do you want to say something, Marvin?
Yeah, what's the significance of there being seven, I'll say candles? What?
The creation, 7 days of the week. Each candelabrum, each light symbolizes the days of the week in which God created the world.
And that's transformed into a single source of light now, right?
Correct, right. Our eternal light is typically one single light. Yeah. Doesn't have to be the shape of a 7-branched candelabra. Correct.
So, Rabbi, what would the third menorah look like when the
We're
temple
gonna
is
get there.
reinstituted?
Oh, that's a good question. Which one? That's a good question. Well, I'm not going to answer that, right? But my bet would be the original version, but I don't know. It's a good question. But Sherry, if you want to read to us, there is a third potential for what the menorah was. Let me find it. Here we go. The legendary miracle of the cruise oil, blah, blah, blah. Just this paragraph. The 8 hollow rods.
At the time that the sons of Hasmonean high priest triumphed over the kingdom of Greece, they entered the temple and found there 8 rods of iron, which they hollowed out, and then kindled wicks in the oil, which they had poured into its grooves, creating a menorah.
Okay, by the way, this source is, if you look here, the note, this is from Midrash Pesikta Rabbati, which is a rabbinic midrash work, pretty ancient, around, it's the time of the Talmud, perhaps even earlier. So let me just expand this for a second. This is a third potential menorah that was lit. When the Maccabees entered the temple after fighting, they found 8 iron rods, hollow rods. Now, 8, not hollow rods, 8 iron rods, which they found on the floor. Other versions say that they were spears. They were metal spears used in the fight. And those 8 spears were lying on the ground of the temple plaza. The Maccabees hollowed them out, filled them with oil, put wicks on the top, and I'll show you the visual. They drove them into the plaza floor at the front of the temple. They hammered them into the stone floor, and they lit them aflame. Sort of like, I won't say tiki torches, but the concept is, right, that they had spears that they impaled into the ground at the front of the temple, 8 of them, and those 8 were lit. So that's another historical version.
You're supposed to take the spears and pound them into pruning hooks, not candelabra.
Well, but actually, so some people do write that is like the Maccabees version of bringing that verse to fruition, right? Turning your spears into sources of light that shine, showing God's presence in our world. Isn't that like the most beautiful transformation of a military instrument into a sign of light and peace and joy and everything? So there is some perhaps also historical, not proof, but perhaps that what the Maccabees didn't have enough time to make a new menorah, a full blown wooden base covered in a metal, within a few days. If they wanted to honor that day and change a day which was bad in their history and make it a positive day filled with light, that they saw these metal instruments of war and they wanted to repurpose them, right? We see that a lot, even in Israel, right? There are artists that take the missiles fired from Hamas, from the Gaza Strip, and they repurpose them into jewelry or into art pieces or other things. And this is a repurposing of a piece of war into something that's highly sacred. So, having said that, I'm gonna give you the little what Rabasser Hurwitz, who sort of inspired this, what she writes about this. The menorah is a symbol of resilience that is ever evolving. And so when the Jewish people came back to the temple, the fact that they used this wooden menorah that may have been wrapped in iron and tin and then gold was still intact is a miracle worth celebrating. Resilience emerges from a strong foundation. She's looking, if you remember that the newly cast menorah, the base was a lot thicker than the original sort of artistic base. This is what she says. The base was designed to evolve, that they were based on a strong foundation. Starting with wood, it became a vessel with multiple layers, conveying an image of striving towards growth. The base, often overlooked, must also be evolving, strengthened, and beautified. What do you guys think? Have I sold you?
Sure.
I think the idea of repurposing is very, very powerful, taking something that could be traumatic and very negative in some way having a new view of it. It's absolutely beautiful and inspiring and uplifting. Wonderful.
Amen.
Now, Rabbi, what
Amen.
about something I'm trying to recall, the symbol or logo of Israel? Isn't there a menorah there? And how does would that design relate to these former designs?
Great question. Yeah, so the original quote unquote Jewish symbol wasn't the Star of David. Like the international symbol of Judaism in ancient times was the 7-branch menorah. In fact, if you've ever been to Rome, and thankfully we had the opportunity to travel to Rome several years ago, and if you go to the Vatican, all the ancient Jewish burial tombs, the catacombs and everything else, they are all marked with the menorah. The menorah was the original symbol of Judaism, not the Star of David. And in fact, I looked, when I sort of scrolling through Sefaria, and you can look at all these study sheets, there's actually a whole study sheet about that the menorah was the original symbol of Judaism, the seven branched candelabra. So I don't know if I gave you a full answer, Elliot, other than this was the actually original symbol of what Judaism was. It wasn't the Star of David. That's a later, more modern symbol for Judaism.
It's very moving when you see these Chabad bands driving around, on top of which they have a menorah. That's very, very special.
Yeah.
December 18th, Elliot. The signs have already up.
Yeah.
I have a question about the menorah across the street from the Knesset. Does that?
Yes.
What? I can't remember it off the top of my head.
I'll put it on the screen.
What does that? Which one does that resemble?
I believe that's artistic. I believe it is not. But I'll pull it up. I don't believe it is any of the above. Yeah, see? I'll try to get a better version of it. This is artistic. I don't believe that is based on any of the other ones. See? Can you see it? Close. There's one outside of the Kotel, though, that was constructed, and that one is the first temple version, the original version. Let me see. Old City Menorah. Let me see if that comes up. I don't even know what I'm on. This thing. No, that's the Maccabees version. This thing. Has anyone seen this one before?
Yeah, I have pictures of that one somewhere.
Yeah, that's the Maccabee version one. It's huge. Yeah, it's outside it's in the old city in Jerusalem as you sort of make it. They actually moved. It moved.
If I remember correctly, they moved it between the first time I saw it and the second time I saw it.
Yeah, and they moved it again. Yeah, when I was there a few weeks ago, they moved it. Yeah, and they keep moving it further away from the Kotel, actually.
Which one? That is it the big
gold one? Yeah, the big gold one. Yeah, because they're doing a lot of construction around the Kotel. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Stephen, do you want to unmute? Carefully.
Okay.
Let me get Stephen first and then Marvin.
Carefully.
Yeah, be careful. Yeah.
Thanks for the snow from Cleveland up here.
Sure, you're welcome.
Anyway, my questions, Rabbi, is one of confusion. Okay, 7-day menorah, a symbol of our ancient ancestors, is because of 7 days of creation. You'll answer that in a moment. The one we use this time of year should be called, and it is by a minority, a Chanukiah. That solves the confusion. And that's from an event that's questionable that even took place. It was something in the rabbinic period already. So and the legs of the one in Rome that you're talking of the menorah is.
Okay, you are breaking up a little bit. I'll try to answer what I caught. Okay, so We actually talked about this right at the beginning, I think when most people were on, that the word menorah is a generic word. It's a category of any candlestick. It actually just means candlesticks or candelabrum. It could be one candle, it could be lighting one candle, it could be lighting 7 candles, 8 candles, 100 candles. Menorah is a general term for anything that you light. A Chanukiah is specifically used for Chanukah. It is a menorah. It is a candle holder that we light for Hanukkah that holds 8 or 9 if you include the shamash, I should say it right. So Chanukiah is a subset. It's a specific type of menorah. Menorah is generic. And yes, it's 7. The biblical one is 7 for the 7 days of creation. Yeah.
You know the etymology of menorah? I mean, because I see or in the middle.
It's or. It's
so
or.
Is
Ner.
What's the
or.
rest of it mean? What's the men in the front mean?
Yeah, we need like where's Ruth when you need her? Judy's here at least.
Judy's.
Yeah. Mem in the beginning of something makes it like a noun, like a stronger noun form. I'm not a grammarian, so it's making something into a noun, yeah, or like into a thing. Yeah, I'm trying to think of a better example of it. It's a Hebrew grammar thing. If you want to take like a concept or an adjective and make it into a noun. Yeah.
How about mikdash? You're taking kodesh and putting
Yeah,
it
I
down.
guess so. Yeah, like there's a lot of examples too. Yeah, there's other examples too.
I like the idea of 8 days because I mean it could.
Oh, why 8 days? Yeah, that's what
it could either
asked.
it could either represent a substitution for Sukkot, which a lot of people think. It also is the same as the 8 days for a bris. And I like that idea.
Yeah. So yeah, the short answer for Stephen is if I'm going to look at, I want to try to look, I'm a conservative rabbi. I want to see what the original historical reasons are. And the book of Maccabees that we looked at is sort of that's the oldest historical piece that we have. We feel like it's accurate. We feel like that at least the first 2 books, as Ron said, were written by Jews at the time. And there it says that Hanukkah was, they had an 8 days consecration of the temple, which was a delayed Sukkot. So we still do it. Right now, if they delayed Sukkot 2,000 years ago, do we have to do an 8? They did it 8 days then. Do we have to still have this delayed 8-day celebration of Sukkot when we celebrate Sukkot in its normal time now? Probably not. But this is, some extended reminder, perhaps, of this incredible moment that happened when our ancestors had an 8-day celebration celebrating this miraculous victory. That's sort of how I'll keep it at the moment. I got to think more about it. Yeah, Marvin had a question.
So notwithstanding,
and then we're done. Yeah.
Right. Notwithstanding how the menorah is made, how elaborate it is, isn't the essence of it the light rather than the construction of it?
Yeah. So we talked about this earlier. So what the laws basically are to the point where they focus that you need to be able to see and discern individual lights, right? So when it's the 8th day, our practice is you light 8 candles or have 8 light, right? You have to be able to, when I'm looking at it head on, I have to be able to see 8 distinct lights. So some Chanukiot like are circular or this or that, where you can't actually see the 8 light. That's the law. So yes, anything where 8 lights are lit, you could, I hate to say, like there's stories during the Shoah when, they had like potato, there's a story of the potatoes where they, hollowed out potatoes. So, as horrible as that is, let's go to like when the kids make little, you take Play-Doh and you make a little hole and you can have 8 things. So yeah, it doesn't matter what it is, what it's made. It doesn't matter what a Chanukiah is made of.
Right.
There's supposed to be 8, 8 opportunities to see separate lights lit, and that they're supposed to be lit for at least half an hour. They have to remain lit for half an hour. So as the closer they are, it increases how it heats up the area and they burn faster. So you either need longer burning candles or space them out more so they don't get as warm, so they don't go as quickly. Just want to make two housekeeping notes before we finish. Number one is,
Rabbi, can I make a quick comment?
I'm going to get to you. Can I just do two housekeeping because it's
Yes.
11:05, so people go. We're learning next week. We're going to do another Hanukkah class, and then the next 2 weeks we're not having class. So like December 26th, no class. January 2nd, no class. Then we'll pick back up in January after that. But I'm doing some traveling, so flying back on the red eye on January 1st. So I don't know if I'll be in good spirits to teach a class right after a red eye. Yes. So anyone that needs to go, happy Hanukkah. Hope you're with us, and welcome to stay, Elliot. Yes.
I just want to make a quick comment. This whole discussion is very uplifting, even beyond the Maccabees and the Roman Greco times. We think of the menorah. I think, what do the Jews stand for? It is hope. We have in modern parlance, I'd like to shed some light on the subject, and the idea of Jews as the Or Lagoyim. So all of this is really very inspiring. Despite all of our tsuris throughout history, we are a people that endures and somehow envisions better days. And our role in the world of the Or Lagoyim, kind of shedding light to the non-Jews about what we're about and maybe what God intended us, how we should live as his children of creation.
Amen. Beautiful. Amen. Thanks, Elliot. All right. Everyone have a great day, and can't wait to celebrate Hanukkah, whether it's together in person or virtually this coming week. Bye-bye, everybody.